Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Blokes podcast. Today, our own tall lady is going to talk with us about the women who support and speak on behalf of men and boys. Pull up a stump and join us. Welcome. And as we decided, I think, tall lady, I am going to just turn it over to you. Let's hear it.
Hey everyone. So when it comes to just MRAs in general, men's rights, there's always going to be the conversation of female MRAs. Oh, the loathed, belittled. Why would you betray your own gender, female MRAs? When it comes to female MRAs, it is a tricky conversation, to say the least. And the fact that many people bring up, well, why would there be female MRAs? This is men's right, not females' rights. Why wouldn't women choose this? So on and so forth. Um, Oh, and let's not forget the category of the people who think female MRAs are all just pick-me's and that we're all doing this for romance and trying to find somebody in our lives. Which to that one, I've really got to wonder what in the world makes you think that this is a sexy movement. Um, it's not that, but one of the things that usually comes with answering the why question is and to be 100% honest about this, many female MRAs end up joining just out of personal issues. Um, Either their friend or their partner or their son or brother or significant other was affected by this, that they're noticing their issues, that they're realizing that things have happened to them. There are some really fantastic female MRAs who unfortunately did not come along until it personally affected their lives, like if family members were in prison. There are also just some who sort of over time noticed certain societal trends and realized that things were not as they seemed and started realizing male issues. And then also lastly, I would say there's sort of a category of them where they have their own personal issue, but instead of it being something that affects a family member, it's maybe the way they're being treated personally. And they end up seeing the reflection of that, and the reflection being, well, you're treated this way, but what is the effect on men from that? Because there's always two sides to a stereotype, the expectation on the female and the expectation on the male. And so with that, you've gotten very different MRAs, and some female MRAs are incredibly amazing. They have done a lot for this movement. Erin Pizzey has tried to start males domestic violence shelter, which was such a great move. We've seen some honey badgers who have done amazing progress in terms of just getting the issues noticed, planning events, hosting events. But there's also the new realm of social media, and we're seeing a lot more female MRAs pop up on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, etc. And as there is with anything in social media, there is your positives and your negatives and your downright just what in the cupcake kind of activist. And I think it's and for people who ask about because people will notice like women fight a lot and they ask about female rays like if we get along. No, we don't all get along. We respect each other generally, but we're all not each other's biggest fan. And yes, unfortunately there is a lot of female on female fighting in the MRA community sometimes. Some female MRAs just it's hard. They understand the issue. They're talking about it, but they don't fully understand it, and they get a little too lost in their fame and their followers and attention that they forget sight of the issue. And I think another one is just the fact that they don't really know maybe how to discuss as well. There are some female MRAs that just aren't very good at discussing with their own, if you will. They're good at sounding logical at other points, but other points they can be quite rude, or they just aren't really fully explaining things well, or they don't bring out as many points. And, there's also the issue of we're still females. whether or not we're supporting this movement, we still do not have a penis. We were not born male. Many of us have not dealt with societal male pressure, so we cannot speak for men. That is the main point. We cannot speak for men. We can advocate, so we can say, hey, they have issues, but we cannot speak for them. We can't say, hey, this is the issue. No, we can say from the people we've spoken to, from the men in our lives, from the men we've spoken to, this is the issue they seem to have. But
Yeah.
a lot of people sort of forget that, and it gets thrown over the side, and they start sort of thinking they're speaking for men. I think the bigger issue is then guys are like, oh my God, she's so famous, she's speaking for men, it's great. But they don't think about it as, no, she should be speaking as what she's noticed, and she should probably be speaking more maturely, and she should be trying to learn. The point of this is not fame. The point of this is to try and find a middle ground where we all sit down and we discuss out, hey, here's the issue on this side, here's the issue on this side. Like, how are we going to resolve everything? Saying drastic things, poking at each other, being discontent because someone doesn't agree with you is not a part of this. And to be honest, there are some of them which I think they just need time to maybe find their own identity, or maybe need to have more self-reflection before they do things, because it seems that their personal values are conflicting their work. And I'm gonna nicely leave it at that for now. I don't
And
want to go too in detail because I don't want to shit on anyone. I hate the sisterhood, just personally. I really can't. I've never seen a healthy sisterhood. And I don't like that the female MRA community, there's not often a healthy sisterhood. And I'm not going to be the person who's throwing mud on people and starting more stuff. I will respectfully not name names, but
well,
I will name attributes they can improve on.
yeah. And I'm glad you brought up just to kind of start off with, that not having enough of a healthy sisterhood, and it just sort of being, a meme that, there is no sisterhood, et cetera, et cetera. And, now our problem is that for millennia, there's always been this, I guess, lack of a better term, perception uh, of a healthy brotherhood, that we've kind of lost track of. And so there's a lot of empathy there among thoughtful men for, you know, hearing women say, the sisterhood is never, safe, it's never healthy, it always it always degrades into a mean girls club or whatever the case may be. And it's like, we gotta confess that now we got the same problem, that brotherhood is, and just male cohesion is struggling right now. I personally want a lot more brothers than I currently have, but we're not living in a culture that really promotes that anymore. And like my colleague Dead Duck here, is easy to be brotherly with, because you have a lot of regard and a lot of put a lot of value, in the history of male camaraderie and brotherhood and just male cohesion because of what it's done for everybody. And that, it's like if we've fallen short, it's that, we historically have never, really promoted that and encouraged that among women, to have a sisterhood that includes camaraderie and accountability and standards, right? That we have. I mean, whether it's an academic brotherhood or a military brotherhood or a corporate brotherhood, or a social brotherhood or a cult, it doesn't really matter. It's like, we have a bar to entry, right?
Mm.
You got to come with this, or at least come ready to make that happen for yourself. Otherwise, just by definition, you're not a brother yet, right?
Yeah.
And that's a newer thing among women. It's there, right? And it's being, it's under construction, but it seems to be a long, slow process. I mean, it's so easy, for me anyway, to just listen, to most women talking about, uh, some of the grifter MRA types, or supposed men's advocate types, and hear what everybody has to say about them. And it's like, we're men, so I don't think there's much we can do about changing their mind and changing their behavior from here. So we can either shrug and look away, or we can complain about it, right? But the women that speak for men, I don't know, it's like I've got this maybe irrational hope, that enough pressure brought to bear, on women like that from other women, will kind of, like I say, get them to muster up and uh, have the right motives and the right values. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not really part of my world much. So I don't know. I mean, it's either possible to do that or it isn't, right? But if it isn't, then like, the job of the men is to leave women like that alone. And it's for the same reason that it's our job to leave, like, just anti-male grifter women alone as well. And I was in another meeting earlier today where I pointed out that, we male men's advocates have been shaking a stick, for quite some time now, at all of that. And my position is, it's time to, put the stick down and start withholding the carrot, to stop participating, in the process, because it just seems to be making it worse, and to encourage other men to say, look, just don't get involved, right? Leave them alone, you know. But I don't know, I spend my time, at least among the women that I spend time with, the common thread, whether they be, primarily advocates for men or primarily advocates for women, the common thread is that they put a high value on humility and curiosity, and it's like, I spend my time with them because I put a high value on humility and curiosity, and they put a high value on compassion and regard, and I put a high value on compassion and regard. And all of these, very visible groups of people on every side of this, that we, have such a hard time putting up with, they don't put any value on those things. If you talk to them in the language of humility and compassion and curiosity and regard, suddenly they get really quiet, right? It's like they don't want to talk about that, you know, and I think there's a reason for it, you know, and whether it's like greed or uh, like craving for attention, or some unresolved pain or whatever. It could be any one of a number of things, but the thing is, it don't matter. It's like the origin of it is not important. The important thing is that, like I say, that they stop doing that, right? That they stop uh, disregarding those values in favor of more attention, and in some cases more money, and more influence, right? Because things like money and attention and influence, you know, whether or not you have a big desire for those things, I mean, all by themselves, those are not even bad things. Money, attention, and power are neutral, right? But how you get them and what you do with them once you have them makes all the difference in the world. And like I said, you know, too often in our culture we measure everything by how much money you make, without even looking at uh, what you had to do to get it and what you do with it once you got it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to that, there are people that are not really, I mean, they're not making a financial killing on like I say, this very hostile and aggressive and unreasoning approach, but they are getting a lot of attention, and they are getting they have a lot more influence, than they should have. And what they're doing with that attention and that influence is just they're using it to perpetuate itself. And that's, like I said, that's why there are a lot of things these same people just won't talk about, um, and they just won't oh uh listen to, um, and it's like at some point you just have to kind of abandon the project and say this person or these people are gone beyond recall, and kind of give up. But along, our ability to give up on them should be matched with the ability to take that same energy and that same focus and point it to the people that deserve it. I think I mentioned previously on this podcast a good example, of a pretty staunch male feminist, is a guy that only shows up on TikTok, as far as I know. I've seen him once as a panel participant on a YouTube uh, uh, video, but other than that, he's only showing up on TikTok. I think he can be searched just using the name Jack, but his @ is Watchful Coyote. The point I'm trying to make is that he's delivering a lot of the same messages that are being delivered by people, that we all know and love, like the Mikes, Mike Flood and Mike Kimmel, and where always forget the last name of the other one, the other academic, and also, of course, ex-patriarch, and was this guy that just got burned at the stake, Robbie something or other, was another TikToker, and he got nailed to the wall. The point being that there a lot of the same language is being used by guys like Jack, but he approaches it with humility and curiosity and honesty and compassion, and regard, so he's just a whole lot easier to listen to. Another really good example is our own tall lady. A lot of the same things that you say about us and with us, are there's some of the same things that, even the more obnoxious ones say. It's just that, everybody in the room understands why you're doing what you're doing. And it's not just to get attention or to get picked or, to get more followers or to make money. You're doing it because you see a problem and, you want for it to be resolved sooner than later. Yeah, you have a vested interest. You brought up earlier about, how this has affected your own personal life, right? Because it does, but you're willing to admit that, you're willing to say, look, part of, why all this is going on is because there are men in my life that I love and care about and don't want to see come to a bad end. It's not that complicated, and like I say, the ones that don't approach it that way, you're not going to hear them put it in those very simple and straightforward terms, and you're not going to hear them talk about really very much about their motives at all, right? Because if they're if in order to do that, they're either going to have to lie, right? And say that they have only good motives, or they're going to have to tell the truth and say, look, I'm doing this for attention, and I'm doing it for influence, and I'm doing it for money. And the same thing is true over on our side. I always have to remind people that even after Mike Kimmel got, pilloried for his personal behavior toward his interns, he's still over there at Stony Brook, and he's still making six figures, and he's still, as far as I know, he's still publishing, so but in doing all of that, he's not explaining to people why he's doing what he's doing, and that's how guys like that end up making a movie like The Mask We Live In, or The Mask You Live In, sorry. I mean, I don't know if either of you have seen that documentary, but I have, and it's just a portrait of hopelessness. It's a timeline of the fact that, or the assertion that, men are insufficient in the modern world, and that correcting that is going to be this, this major engineering project that has no consideration for the environment that the project is taking place in, and it's like it reminds me of Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about the evolution of the modern, or of the complex life. And he said, you can tell that evolution is sometimes a really poor designer, because it put a waste treatment facility right in the middle of an amusement park. If you think about that, you'll get it. And it's like, this is the kind of thing that that they're promoting, is to put I don't know I guess it wouldn't be an amusement park, but put this sparkling and pure new man into the world in an environment that no longer welcomes him, right? And no longer has any regard for him, and still maintains that whatever value he has in that culture is whatever value he can come up with on his own, because he certainly is not born with it. But anyway, Dead Duck, what do you have to say?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the women who talk on men's issues that are grifters for a minute. We've done enough of that on this podcast. I think it might be important to talk about the women that are doing it for the right reasons. Several of whom I know through social media. One of whom is a personal friend, and that's Feminine House Bunny. She started off doing father's rights, which I think is where I would say 99% of women who come into the men's movement actually come from. Is the father's rights issues. They either see their own fathers went through some pretty horrible situations in divorce. They've married someone who is going through the family court system. They've maybe had a brother or a male friend or someone who's gone through it, and they've started looking into it and theorizing, wow, okay, people are talking about this, but they're not getting the airtime maybe that I could. So, these women start talking about these issues, and you've got the manicured
Also,
mum.
false accusations is another big one.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, it is.
Those are like the main two.
Yeah, definitely. So I say you got the manicured mum as well. She's another one. Started mainly on father's rights advocate. The dadvocate is another one. She does the same thing. But then you've also got women like Reclaiming Your Voice, who is a victim of extreme domestic violence and also sexual violence at the hands of a man. And yet she's out there speaking on men's issues. And she's not doing it because she can make money off of it, but she's doing it because she generally thinks it's the right thing to do. And unfortunately, you won't see her on Piers Morgan or, some other form of high-profile legacy media. And these are the ones that really should be getting their faces out there. I mean, we can go back to the OGs of the likes of Janice Fiamengo, Hannah Wallen, Karen Strawn. You've obviously mentioned Erin Pitsey already. Talk about the OG of the OGs. Erin was basically red pilled in 1971 by the actions of the very women and the feminists that she tried to support when she tried to opening a shelter for abused men and found out what that did. So, I think I'd like to start by praising those women because I think they're doing it for the right reasons. Now, the drawback of social media, I suppose, is that even if they're not intending to make money off of it, that can kind of happen. It's sort of as a byproduct, but it's certainly not. They're not putting a Patreon link in their videos and things like that and saying, come and speak, chat with me in private and have access to these images and all this sort of stuff. They're not about that life. They're just about talking about the issues. And I wish they would do a little bit more trying to suggest solutions. I think that's a men's movement thing anyway. We spent far too long talking about the issues and not suggesting resolutions for the issues. So yeah, I think that's where I'm going to start. I don't know if one of you wants to pick that up and expand on it anywhere.
Yeah. One thing that sprung to mind, and this, I'll put on myself, is that, I too often, it's like I go at it from the assumption that the ones doing it right exist and everybody knows it, but in public, that's really not true. In public and among the civilians, I suppose, most people wouldn't know or wouldn't be aware of, the Miss Fanny Adams or the manicured mom, or any of them, because as you said, they don't get the, they don't get the boosts, right? But even below, or along with that, I know of just off the top of my head, again, these are women who don't even identify as any kind of advocate for men, but yet, they speak for us without really knowing that they're speaking for us, right? Or like that's not the, the whole intent, right? But for me, and again, Tolly, I hate to keep picking on you, But the reality is that, you are just this exemplar of how to do it properly, how to do it how to do it so that you can keep doing it, and so that you can stay clean, like stay clean, meaning, not being a target for, um, being unreasonable or mindless, and also, not being vulnerable to accusations of, everything from pick me to grifting. You're just, you have identified a wrong and are trying to make it right. And like I say, the fear of, from these other people, of making it that simple, and just saying this is something bad that needs to be made better. Like I said, you just don't hear that in those other spaces. And to be honest with you, when I spend time around the other campfires, I hear a lot of the same thing. That there are just too many people that have appropriated the desire and the movement to right a wrong, and turned it to their own personal ends, right? And I'm like, in spaces like TikTok, that all of the women's advocates for men that are working there seem to get bogged down in having to defend their position again, as opposed to spending time offering solutions. And another much more neutral example of that, is someone I follow that is really concerned with just mental health in general. And she gets like attacked all the time in the comments. So now, of course, she spends most of her time on TikTok defending herself, right? Instead of offering help. And the reason that I don't really participate, like I don't put my stuff on TikTok, is really for that reason. Because that platform is it's like Twitter. It's much too vulnerable to, being dragged down into the abyss of constantly having to respond, to what people are saying to you or saying against you. And I'm like, you know, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in figuring out, what's wrong and what to do about it. What people, you know, think of me or my methods are none of my business anyway. If there are people who think ill of me, or think well of me, but they don't know me, I don't know about that, and I don't want to know. I'm busy and I'm old and I don't have an unlimited amount of time, to at least to even propose solutions. So anyway, that's where I'm at with it.
Um, I think the thing is that bringing up like other campfires and people just doing this out of good. I think that gets into the conversation of inherently good, inherently bad, and like what makes a person good. And I don't think anyone ever does anything without a personal attachment to it. I think it's just how you work with the personal attachment, and not meaning just like passion, just how do you sort of work about it? How do you go about the work? If you're only focusing on just your goal and then you leave after that, I mean, good, you made the change for the time you were there, but it's for sex you're leaving. But if you start this journey and you figure out that you need to do more than that, that's where you really make progress. If you do more than your personal thing.
Yeah.
And some of the women in the art campfires are very used to them, me, I-centered sort of worlds and don't sometimes get past the point of that extension.
Yeah. In fact, yeah, Duck, you mentioned a name in the chat that kind of reminds me of what you were just saying, tall lady. because Sinead O'Connor, who just recently passed away, I hear tell, and of course this is, probably never going to see the light of day in any real way, but I hear tell, that she was kind of supporting men and speaking out about their issues before it was cool, right? I mean, not of course after people like Aaron Pitsy, but still a long time ago, before it got very much attention. And tall lady, you're right. There has to be enough compassion and understanding to understand, and accept the fact that, people really don't ever do anything for just no reason at all, right? There's got to be, got to be some kind of a payoff, even if it's in their own heart, right? Of course, ideally, people should most often try to do things, for the greater good that is, most beneficial to their heart, to their spirit. Certainly, it's never a good idea to, start trying to promote social justice just for money, because that never goes well. I mean, this is ineffective, but people still do it, and regarding, the dead duck, as you said, the OGs in our movement, it's like they never made it a secret why they were doing what they were doing, like Erin Pitsy, all the way back when she was, doing interviews after starting those shelters, was pointing out the fact that the women in these shelters were, openly confessing that they were just as violent as the men that they were living with. And that was all the way back in the 70s, right? And people like Karen Strawn and Allison Tiemann and Hannah Wallen, excuse me, and the honey badgers in general, they don't make a secret out of it either. Here is why we are doing what we are doing. Like Karen frequently will talk about the experience that she had meeting and getting into a relationship with the man that she's in a relationship with, and just what an absolute nightmare, that was. She's literally talked him down off a bridge, and that's a motive. I mean, just like men want the women in their lives to flourish and be happy and, have like stability and security and all that. Women want that for us too, right? At least the ones that, that still have their wits about them. So yeah, it's a personal thing. From what I understand, again, this is sort of a out of pocket example, but Sinead O'Connor had a personal reason for why she was talking about us the way she was. I mean, she was a celebrity and she was a singer and, all of that, but she was also always an activist, right? And, when it came to things like sexual abuse from within the Catholic Church, and just the oppressiveness of the Catholic Church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She knew that it had every bit as much of an impact on men as it did women, if not more. Right? And because of that, you have to look, well, a reasoning person has to look at that and say, I understand why she says what she says, and I understand why she does what she does. And And, it's like even with people like Karen and Allison and to some degree Hannah, then, the only thing still open to question is how they do what they do, right? And, for Aaron and Karen and Allison and Hannah, and even Janice to some degree, doing what they did all the way back then, is for one thing, it's the only reason I'm here, because otherwise I probably would have lived out my life not knowing anything about it. But besides all that, it's the only way, that it would have ever gotten any attention at all, right? And same thing with guys like Paul Elam. It's like I've heard people compare Warren Farrell and Paul Elam to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. That nobody really cared to listen to Martin Luther King's Having a Dream until Malcolm X said by any means necessary. In other words, at least for a time, the really aggressive and borderline hostile approach is the only way to get any play, right? But that has a very short lifespan to it usually, right? It outlives its usefulness pretty quickly, and our colleague in the other group that we belong to, he still frequently employs humorous mockery and making fun of. And it's kind of the same thing, for a time, it's probably necessary, but it outlives its usefulness pretty quickly. And it tends to become counterproductive. And one thing, that again, tall lady, I really admire, that I have like genuine respect for, is the fact that, you still manage to be clear and vocal and unafraid, but you don't make fun of people, and you don't just spend all your time telling people to piss off, and it's like it takes a certain kind of human being to pull that off, right? There are others, you're not alone in that. The only regrettable thing is how difficult it is to get all of you together, because that is tricky, right? And there's some I guess fear, anxiety about spending too much time looking out for others like yourself. I know, I suffer that anxiety too, right? But the difference between you and me is you have a lot more to lose than I do. I don't have anything to lose. I already lost it. It's gone. And, I'm just okay without it. But, for you, for some of my other friends, again, around that other campfire, they remind me of you and you remind me of them. But it's not just what you say, but how you say it, and it's not just what you say, but what you don't say, like I said, I wouldn't spend 10 minutes, trying to reason with somebody like Chloe or Expatriarch or Mike Kimmel, or what's her name, Jessica Valenti. These people are doing what they're doing for their own reasons, and they don't have anything to do with me, and frankly, they don't have anything to do with you either, but there are women, there are men out there don't behave that way, and trying to get together with them and spend time with them, and reason with them is difficult because they're hard to find. People, who's really easy to find is Hannah Pearl Davis, Pearlie. You can find her everywhere, but my friend, well, I won't mention a name, but She's a good friend of mine and therapist, an alternative therapist. She's harder to find, and she's on every platform, you know. But if I mentioned her by name, you probably haven't heard from her or heard of her, you know, but they out there. You know.
Just us two. Just us two. The tall ladies had to leave the building.
Yeah. Well, thanks to you, tall lady, wherever you are.
Yeah, I was just about to say to her, having the ability to tell people to go forth and multiply and take the mickey is a useful skill to have.
It is, you know, I like I said, this isn't, you know, uh, these aren't part of the rules, you know. I mean, these are more like guidelines where to make some use of, you know, being really aggressive and, you know, really push back hard. There's still places for that, you know, and where to be, like I say, you know, even mocking and condescending, and, you know, to use ridicule. There's still places for that.
Yeah.
You know, I always leave it in the hand, leave those things in the hands of other people just because they do it better than I do. You know, I don't function very well, you know, just in screaming matches and making fun of people. And that's just not my deal. But you're right, there are still places for it, just fewer and fewer, you know, and I take that as good news, you know. If there are fewer places to mock and ridicule, you know, opponents, and if there's fewer places to you know, to have screaming matches, I'm happy with that. You know, and again, you know, it's because the people that, you know, they function only on mockery or aggression or hostility, you know, they have a different set of motives than we do. You know, they're not, at the end of the day, they're not interested in the same thing we are, you know. And you know, sometimes they're worthy of screaming matches and mockery as well. You know, because it's like, you know, I tell people there's some people, you know, even actually part of our movement, and when I hear them sometimes I think, dude, stay off my side, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want you here, you're not helping.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you're
That's
right,
fair.
I mean, these are, you know, these aren't hard and fast rules, but they're definitely, you know, overdue for adjustment.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
my, you know, my, I guess, work that I do, you know, is getting people to see each other from, you know, other sides of this, right? You know,
Yeah,
that
I'd happily work with feminists if, unfortunately, all the ones I've encountered hadn't been so bleeding awful to deal with.
you know, well,
So
Dad,
that is what it is.
it's, they exist, I promise you. They
Yeah,
really do.
one thing I would like to say is, obviously, we mentioned Miss Fanny Adams earlier on from TikTok. Although she is certainly a friend of this podcast and other spaces, I think it would be a mistake to call her a men's rights activist. I think she's an out and out egalitarian.
Yeah, yeah, she's an
Probably,
advocate. She's an advocate for egalitarianism, you
yeah.
know, and I don't know, you know, it's like because a phrase becomes loaded, you know, if she said, "Hey, I'm an egalitarian," you know, there would always be 5 minutes of her backing that up, right? And making a clear definition, you know, and I do that as, you know, in the other spaces I do that as an advocate for men. I say, you know, I always have to back that up by saying I don't mean, you know, I'm a traditional conservative. I don't mean that, you know, I'm a like, you know, red pill fanatic, um misogynist. You know, all I mean is that men and boys are struggling these here days and something better than what has been has to be figured out.
Yeah.
And then it's probably more egalitarian than advocate for men, and that's why it makes me comfortable and sort of confident coming into a space like this and talking to somebody like you and saying, like I say, our correspondent personality type exists over there too. Our problem is that we have this pre-existing antipathy and anxiety about them, and they have this pre-existing antipathy and anxiety about us. And it's like it prevents more of the kind of conversation and discourse than there from happening.
The problem is, though, isn't it, that feminism has painted itself as the movement for egalitarians, for gender equality, however that looks.
Yeah.
And then when you start to dig into it, you realize that that's not the case.
Right.
It's a lie.
Right. And when I'm over there, I just openly say, for that reason, I can't wear the name tag. Because I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be the marketing strategy, but I'm kind of a tough customer, right? And I would say the same here, that like I've had people promote to me just the idea of being, like I say, just really red pilled and really really solid and strident about my masculinity, because the red pill is supposed to be the solution to all of this too. And I'm like, it doesn't look like it to me.
No, not me either.
If it here, and I tell people, I say, if you could convince me this is really the answer, I'm not being stubborn. I would take it, and I would shut up. You would never hear from me again, right? But you haven't convinced me. You haven't shown me, look, this is, like indisputable proof that our way works, right? And I'm like, no, it don't, I wish it did. Hell, I wish feminism worked, like if everybody could have just been happy with it, right? Instead of being human, then this conversation wouldn't be taking place. Everybody would be happy. We'd be going on about our lives, right? Now, sitting here after what, like 150 plus years of feminism, things are where they are. I have to point to that and say, this didn't work.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, we've almost got to go back to the start and try again.
Right. And that's like I compare, this more generalized social problem with the social and again, I'm biased, but the social problem, the social disease that alcoholism and addiction was looked at as.
Yeah.
But and I said, we've come up with a workable and sustainable solution. Unfortunately, it only, it's very difficult for more than a small percentage of, the sufferers to be able to do it and stay with it. But it is something. But I said, the good news is you're only talking about 1 in every 10 people. What we're talking about here is literally everybody, like everybody, is impacted by this and, is forced into a choice of either taking a stand or hiding, and most people frankly choose to hide, for which I don't blame them very much. Except that now, they've ignored it long enough that it's gotten bad for everybody. Right. And, as you said, there's this kind of compulsion to just go back to the beginning, to go back to the roots of it and start over. But my position on that is we could do that, but then we're back in that place where we're talking just unimaginable amounts of wealth and effort and national and international will to make it right. And these days we're kind of running hard in the wrong direction, and so it's not just, hey, stop going that way, but hurry up and come over this way quickly, and watch where you step. Right? And it's like, that's, people just trying to, I'm trying to have some compassion and mercy for people who are just trying to get from one end of their life to the other with, without too much misery. And it's like, that's a lot to ask. It really is. And like I say, mentioning to you and Tall Lady the value in having these other conversations with these other people. There really is value in it. And I have found that it helps me a lot, but I never forget for a second, that you might not be in a position where you can do that very easily, and it's like, that's, if I was just telling you, hey, Dead Duck, you're remiss until you, go out and make friends with a feminist, right? And, make that person like your buddy. Right, that's unreasonable.
Yeah, it is. The
Now,
other thing,
I mean, but I'm saying, like, I can honestly say I have done that. I mean, some of these are my buddies. They're friends. They're good people, and I know them and I trust them. But like I said, I was forced into a situation where I kind of had to, because that's all there was. But for me to just say, well, I did it, so everybody should do it. That's not, then we're back in, Michael Kimmel and Chloe Roma land, and it's like, I can't do that.
My problem is, okay, we've heard feminism's side of this for over 150 years, and we're now just starting to really hear the men's rights side of this. And it's only now that in the last maybe 15 years that it's become acceptable to even say you're a men's rights activist, let alone discuss men and boys issues. So when feminism comes round to the idea that these are important conversations to have, and the whole patriarchy myth and everything else, until that's done away with, we're not going to be able to come to a middle ground. Patriarchy, a system set up by men for men, but then patriarchy hurts men too. It's like, well, no, that's two different things.
Yeah.
You can't sit there and tell me that men are all powerful, omnipotent, and everything else, and then in the very next breath tell me that the men are suffering because of the men who set the system up. It's like, well, no, doesn't work. I mean, that, I'm afraid. And you sitting there telling me that any crisis of mental health that I may or may not have had is down to toxic masculinity or something like that. Or men don't cry enough and all this sort of stuff. I know I'm being mocking there, but you hear that kind of thing,
right?
And you just think, no, I don't want to be involved. Thank you. I don't want to have a conversation with you,
right?
Because it's quite clear to me you don't want to have a conversation. You just want to convert me to your way of thinking. It's like, well, no,
right.
It's not a conversation we're having. And we started ourselves talking about women that have become involved with the men's movement, and they suffer an awful lot of abuse for it. Yep. They really, really do.
Yeah.
One of the most common retorts that they receive is, "Oh, you're just a pick me." Now, the vast majority of these women, from what I know of their personal lives, are either picked, in inverted commas, either they are in relationships,
right,
or they have good relationships with the men around them.
Right.
It doesn't have to necessarily be an intimate relationship, but they have good relationships with the men around them. So they're doing this not to be picked by anybody. They're just the vast majority of them are doing it just for the right reasons. And the right reason is because it needs to be done.
Right.
The
Right.
conversations need to be had, and there needs to be an alternative perspective offered on things like, custody, mental health, sexual violence, domestic violence, and everything else. And I think it was the leader of the National Coalition for Men, gentleman by the name of Harry, who said, if we're going to have feminism, we have to have a counterbalance. And perhaps that's the men's movement's job, is to be the counterbalance and to offer a different take on things. And for a very, very, very long time, anybody who was associated with advocacy for men was vilified.
Right.
And I know I've seen interviews with Karen Strawn where she said, I've got it easy as a woman in this movement because you can't throw misogynist and everything else at me where you can with the men that are involved with this movement.
Right. And they do.
And they do, yeah. And we've gone even beyond misogynist. Now we're into incel as an insult, which places the lowest value on somebody as their sexual experience.
Right. And to make that their essential worth.
Yeah.
Which is,
if you're not
in
having
this day
sex,
and
you're
age,
not worth anything.
Yeah, that's not only meaningless, but it's destructive to everyone.
And from what I've seen and what I'm beginning to understand about the coming generations is that they are more sexually conservative than ever before. Now, I know obviously.
After the way our generations have handled it, I don't blame them.
Well, yeah, there is that, I suppose.
Can't be mad about that.
Yeah, my son's generation, for example, I think I can't say with any great certainty, but I don't think any of his friends are sexually active. They're all of legal age in the UK to be so.
Right.
But I don't think any of them are. So are we going to sit there and call a whole generation incels, particularly the boys?
I mean, it's inactivity, but for a reason, to overcome a problem that we kind of gave them. And the things like patriarchy and toxic masculinity, in other words, labels, like really negatively loaded language has been put in front of them long enough, and with so little counterbalancing positive discussion, that it's like no wonder they feel that way. Right. Like a good example is toxic masculinity and suppression of emotions, right? Those same people, right, that I am kind of selling to you now, as reasonable examples from the other side of the divide. I've cried in front of them, right? I've expressed my emotions with them, right? But then I have had to say, look, I don't know what all of that does for you, but it doesn't seem to do the same thing for me. It's like, I don't mind doing it, especially because in most cases I'm paying for it, right? But the point is that, it's something, but it's not very much to me. It doesn't move me, the way all this other stuff does, right? And these things, I can't go, to 99% of the psychologists and psychiatrists and ists out there and expect to get it. I have to come to you few people I found that, can give me what I need, but only being vulnerable and only showing weakness and only crying and only, expressing my emotions other than anger. I mean, I wish it would it's like, I wish things like that would cure me,
Mm,
you know, so I could just like one and done. Okay, I'm good now, you know, but I'm like, it doesn't work that way, you know, at least not for me. Right? You know, and, you know, for me, you know, to be able to do it along with all these other things means that now there's maintenance, you know,
mm,
now I have to continue doing it. I have to find people to do it with, you know, and it's like at some point, it's like, are you down with this or not? You know, because I'm a guy,
mm.
right? You know, and the number of women that I could do it with exists. They're there. There's not very many of them,
Mm,
you know, and that's the thing that then I put it back on them. I say, you understand when I tell you, you know, that you are rare and valuable to me, that's not a compliment, you know, that's a chore, right?
mm.
What I'm telling you is go make more, you know, because there's not nowhere's near enough.
Yeah,
And then they have, I mean, rightfully so, they have the opportunity then to come back to me and say, you know, Les, you're rare and valuable and we think you're great and everything, go make more, you
mm,
know. I'm like, that's a little bit easier said than did, you know.
yeah,
And y'all kind of have a head start on me, but I'm doing what I can, you know.
yeah,
So I, you know, it's like I don't just like give them marching orders. I'm encouraging, you know. But I do it with the understanding that it's an uphill battle. You know, like
yeah,
with Tall Lady. I mean, it's enough for her, you know, because she's got a whole life that she's trying to live, and you know, her own set of battles to fight just for herself. You know, I can't in good conscience order her to go make more good female MRA. You know, it's like
yeah.
good luck with that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely,
Well,
definitely.
anyway, I guess we ought to get this wrapped up because I got to go eat and take care of some stuff.
Yeah, I've got
Any
to go
final
get some
thoughts?
sorted. Um, I suppose really not so much a final thought, but wish that the female MRAs that are doing the actual good work, I wish it was them getting the spotlight of the women of female MRAs as much as I wish people like Andrew Tate didn't get any spotlight or so on and so forth. um, I wish the good ones were getting the spotlight that they deserved for the work that they put in quietly behind the scenes. Yeah, I think that's the best I've got tonight, to be honest.
Well, I wish the same, you know, I really do. Now, I know you've got, you know, connections among them that I really don't so much. Uh, you know, put the word out there. If any of them ever wants to hop on here to talk, they are so welcome
Mm.
because you know in this space, we're not limited to you know a 3 minute TikTok
Yeah, well,
and uh,
2.5 hours later. Yeah.
and it's not you know gonna be a hot seat, you know. So you know if any of the uh lady MRAs out there listening, you know, if you're interested, drop a note in the comments. I mean, uh we're trying to build something here.
Hmm.
So we're going at it very slowly, very
Yep.
carefully. But that's what we're trying to do. You know, things like this are a means to an end. And the
Mm.
end, as I've said so many times, is that, you know, I don't want for one side or the other, or one side or the other to win or to lose. I want this to be over with. And I want
Yeah.
it to stay over with.
Yep.
You know, I want, well, probably obviously not the next generation, but maybe a couple of generations down the way to look back at all of this and shake their heads and say, I can't believe these people behaved this way.
Yep.
And it's a miracle that, you know, they survived long enough to have us.
Yeah, I think as we said in the really long podcast we did a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the UK and the lack of power that the monarch has.
Mhm.
I think it'd be good if in future generations they could look back at us and go, "We're so disappointed in you."
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I would take that,
Yeah,
I really would.
Yeah.
It would be worth it. Because
Yeah.
that would mean, a solution had been found and had been, accepted and deployed for everybody,
Mm.
And if it's a solution that makes me look like a knucklehead, I have no ego about this. What do I care?
Yeah.
Sure, I am the knucklehead.
Mm.
As long as this, this conflict, this war, this crap show is over,
Yeah.
I will take that heat. I don't mind. Even if it happened tomorrow, that would be like, yeah, it was all my fault, guys. My bad. Sorry.
As long as it's over in such a way that things have evened out.
Well, yeah. I mean, something that is sustainable, something that, that your son and daughter and their children and their children's children can do just as comfortably and well as they can.
Mm.
Something
Yeah.
everybody can live with.
Yeah.
It's not utopia, no such thing, but as long as it's doable, and it doesn't take a sociology master's degree to understand.
Mhm.
That's one of my beefs with the other side of this is you guys are, trying to assemble a plutocracy of the intellect and the academy. I said, do you understand where, what that leads to? Right? I mean, those are some of the worst periods in human history when people tried to do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that,
Yeah.
don't do it rationally and don't do it scientifically, because human beings are certainly not rational and we're not subject to the scientific method.
Mm.
I wish we were, but we're never gonna be, as long as we are just people.
Yeah.
We're dumb, panicky, and paranoid.
Yes.
That's
You're
the
human.
way it is. All right, well, I guess that's everything then. Thank you all for listening. And Dead Duck, thank you so much for being with me today. And Tall Lady, wherever you are, thank you for participating. And we really appreciate it. Like I said, anybody interested in putting in their 2 cents, drop a note in the comments and let us know. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.